For 30 years, Vincent Gigante wandered the streets of New York's Greenwich Village, dressed in a tattered bathrobe and babbling endlessly to himself. To the FBI, he was believed to be the boss of New York's most powerful mafia organization, the Genovese crime family. Was Gigante crazy, or was his behavior a shrewd attempt to disguise his position as a ruthless mafia boss? That question would take years to answer.
Every family has eccentrics, even crime families. Crime boss Vincent Gigante, head of New York's Genovese family, was undoubtedly eccentric. The question remained, was he truly mad? Justice rested on the answer. Outwardly, he roamed the streets as a doggedly old man, barely in touch with reality. But in the eyes of the law, he was a cunning conspirator and responsible for murder. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. Organized crime takes a concerted effort to crack. The FBI is devoted to cracking it. The case against Gigante hinged on his ability to stand trial. Was his strange behavior an act of madness or a stroke of genius?
Anyone who witnessed Gigante's ravings would have found it hard to believe that he controlled the largest and most profitable family in the New York Mafia, an organization with a long and bloody history. The origins of the Mafia can be traced back to 13th century feudal Sicilian society. Bands of Sicilian families organized themselves to rebel against the oppressive and ruthless French invaders. Mafia, the acronym for the Italian Morte alla Francia Italia Anela, which translates to death to the French is Italy's cry, became the name that these organized families used to refer to themselves, its meaning synonymous with men of honor. By the 19th century, the Mafia re-emerged in Sicily as a purely criminal culture, mostly hiring themselves out to wealthy landowners to oppress upstart peasants. More and more, the goal of the Mafia became focused on how to generate illegal profits. The tradition continued as waves of Italians emigrated to New York in the 1920s. Most immigrants lived in cramped and poor conditions. As a result of growing ethnic tensions, Sicilian Americans became the target of growing resentment. They needed Mafia protection more and more. Louis Scilero, a third-generation Italian-American, is head of the FBI's New York field office. A 23-year veteran, he is an expert on the Mafia and its intricate structure.
When they first became prevalent in New York City, it primarily victimized members of the immigrant community, where in lower Manhattan they became the victims of extortions and protection rackets. And that's how the Cosa Nostra families originally got their start.
With Prohibition, influence of the crime families grew out from the isolated neighborhoods and began to spread nationwide. A new form of underworld cooperation emerged. Various crime families across America banded together to supply illegal alcohol to a country willing to pay for it.
And I think that probably more than anything gave the Italian gangs, the Italian Cosa Nostra families, a foothold in American society, not only from an organizational standpoint, but certainly from a financial base. Since Prohibition, certainly they then expanded into other areas.
Operating outside the law meant the Mafia had to police itself. For an organization animated by self-interest and greed, there would always be conflict and opposition. An elite group of killers were organized to enforce Mafia rules, thereby ensuring its survival. This group of mob enforcers came to be known as Murder, Inc. By the early 1940s, Murder, Inc. would be responsible for hundreds of mob-related murders nationwide. The powerful New York bosses during the Mafia's early years, Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello, set up a ruling body for the Mafia, responsible for delegating territories and duties among the various gangs nationwide. Home for America's 5 largest families, New York remained the center of the Mafia's expanding foothold in America. It remains so to this day.
The 5 New York families consist currently of the Gambino family, the Bonanno, the Lucchese, the Colombo, and the Genovese family. Each of those families are also members of the Commission and also have their base in New York City.
The Commission, composed of the bosses of the 5 New York families, acts as a criminal board of directors, settling disputes between families and making major decisions on Mafia business. Each family is governed by its administration, comprised of the boss, the underboss, and the consigliere, or counselor, who are responsible for directing their family's criminal activity. Below the administration in the family hierarchy are the captains. The captains are the leaders of crews of soldiers, the men responsible for carrying out the day-to-day criminal activity. To become a soldier, properly known as a wise guy or good fella, an individual has to first be made or officially inducted into the secret society. He must blindly obey the rules of Cosa Nostra, Italian for this thing of ours. He is sworn to put the family ahead of all else. If he is asked to kill, he must faithfully do so. It was against this backdrop, a bustling immigrant community with an expanding Cosa Nostra influence, that Vincent Gigante grew up. His parents came from Naples and settled in Lower Manhattan. Vincent finished 8th grade and started trade school, but soon dropped out. Less than a decade later, Gigante became a wise guy in the Genovese crime family. Vincent Gigante's crime career spanned a turbulent time in American Mafia history. The mob had expanded its reach into legitimate businesses, the various families fighting to control them. And in the ensuing turf wars, violence was often the final arbiter. The family that Gigante attached himself to was steeped in Cosa Nostra's American origins. The infamous Charles Lucky Luciano, responsible for organizing and structuring the American Mafia, was the family's first boss until he was imprisoned in 1936. As a result, Luciano's family administration, Frank Costello, nicknamed the Prime Minister of the Underworld, and Vito Genovese, fought for control of the family. Costello won out, but Vito Genovese began plotting his takeover. A young Vincent Gigante first gained notoriety as a mobster in 1957 when he attempted to murder Frank Costello. Within the Mafia, it was widely believed that Vito Genovese had ordered the hit to get rid of his rival. Gigante's bullet only grazed Costello's head, but apparently Costello got the message. Soon after the shooting, he put out word that he was retiring. Vito Genovese was now the boss of the family that would take his name. Gigante was arrested for attempted murder and brought to trial, but the case was dismissed for lack of a witness. The location and angle of Costello's wound indicated he probably saw the would-be assassin, but at the trial, he failed to identify Gigante as the shooter. Even for an ousted boss, the oath of secrecy remained sacred. Gigante continued to make money for the Genovese family through illegal enterprises. 2 years after the failed assassination attempt, he was arrested and convicted of narcotics violations. He received a 7-year sentence. Convicted mobsters are expected to do their time and remain silent. If Gigante served his time and kept his mouth shut, he would be rewarded after his release. It was up to Gigante to figure out how to avoid future arrests. He was a model prisoner, neat, polite, and willing to take on any job. Gigante's cooperation was so impressive that some prison officials wrote glowing reports. He was released early from the federal penitentiary in Lewisburg for good behavior when he was 35 years old. Gigante now devised a secret plan that he hoped would prevent his return to prison forever. He didn't want to leave his Mafia life or give up his shot at becoming the boss of the family. After his release in 1964, Gigante's public behavior began to grow bizarre. He became a frequent sight on the streets of Greenwich Village. Gigante could be found wandering the neighborhood, appearing disoriented and mentally unstable. Not long after he left prison, Gigante learned of a police investigation over his association with known mobsters. In 1969, he was indicted for attempting to bribe New Jersey police officers. Allegedly, he offered them money in exchange for information about surveillance and ongoing investigations in the Genovese family. Now at almost 40 years old, he returned to his mental disability as a foil and checked himself into a psychiatric hospital for the first time. To support his story, Gigante and his relatives began to revise his medical history. While Gigante was at Lewisburg, his mother had been required to fill out a detailed family history. She said Vincent was a healthy, happy child. She noted only a speech impediment and a slight heart murmur. He had been a boxer, but never had a serious injury. By the time of the 1969 indictment, however, Gigante's lawyers claimed he was not competent to stand trial. His family suddenly remembered a host of mental problems. He'd been given to severe temper tantrums. He had a phobia for the dark. He had been truant from school. He was at one time obese and had learning problems. The incompetency argument worked. Gigante never stood trial for the 1969 bribery charges. That same year, Gigante's boss, Vito Genovese, died of heart failure while serving a prison sentence for narcotics trafficking. In the decade that followed, the Genovese family was so secretive that for law enforcement, it was difficult to tell exactly who the boss was. Even had the FBI been able to identify the Genovese family leadership, making a case against them was another story. Witnesses were hard to come by. Mobsters who violated the sacred oath faced certain death. The best the FBI could do was to go after individual crimes. There were no laws that focused on bringing down the entire criminal family. As Gigante was moving up in the family, the federal government was about to make the FBI's job a little easier. In 1970, Congress passed the Racketeer Influences and Corrupt Organization Act, better known as the RICO laws.
What the racketeering law allowed us to do was to look at the family as a criminal enterprise and to attack the family as a criminal act. That became much more effective if you look back from the mid-70s to the 80s in terms of actually indicting the entire family and the entire hierarchy of that family.
The RICO laws require that the government prove that Mafia families are essentially criminal enterprises. They must show that the crimes committed by the boss and members of his family are committed to either expand the criminal enterprise or to increase a family member's position within that enterprise. To successfully bring down a family, the government has to prove that any one of several criminal acts, ranging from racketeering and extortion to murder, has been committed. By 1979, now armed with federal legislation aimed directly at organized crime, the FBI had devoted teams to exclusively focus investigations on the 5 major families. The FBI's Genovese squad finally learned that Vincent Gigante was on a fast track with the family. Special Agent Richard Rudolph had been assigned to investigate the Genovese crime family.
Through informants and other law enforcement agencies who were exchanging information, we became aware that Mr. Gigante was an individual with much respect in the Genovese crime family and operated out of an area in Lower Manhattan. Because he was an up-and-coming person with a lot of respect within the family, we began to do some surveillances of Mr. Gigante.
With the FBI continuing to build its arsenal against organized crime, Gigante's cat and mouse game intensified. He stepped up his public show of mental disorder. In the late 70s and into the 80s, he was admitted 5 more times for psychiatric treatment. The FBI continued to keep tabs on Gigante. Agents learned that he frequented the Triangle Social Club, a gathering place for Genovese crime figures.
He could be found there almost on a daily basis. He lived in the neighborhood. He was an individual that could be found there in the late afternoons and into the early hours of the morning, and people would come to see him as opposed to him going to see other people.
Though Gigante's association in the Genovese family seemed certain to investigators, Gigante's family and doctors continuously told investigators that he led a very narrow existence. They said his whole world was confined to the block where he lived and the church he attended with his mother. He was barely functional at home and could not care for himself, they said. But with every passing day, the FBI and New York police were seeing a very different Vincent Gigante. In the early 1980s, the Mafia in the Northeast went through a particularly tumultuous time with several killings. Internal disputes within the family resulted in a string of assassinations. The FBI suspected Gigante was responsible for these gangland executions, especially those intended as punishment for breaking Cosa Nostra rules. Gigante was known to be a traditionalist. He wanted the rules obeyed, and when they were broken, retribution was sure to follow. It started with the murder of Philadelphia crime boss Angelo Bruno. Although Bruno's family was well outside New York, all families answered to the members of the commission. Gigante was upset because Bruno had been assassinated by his own men in a grab for control of the family. A Cosa Nostra rule had been violated. No one can kill a boss unless the commission sanctions it, and they seldom do. It was rumored that Gigante himself launched an investigation into Bruno's murder. Retribution was swift. Less than a month later, Tony Bananas Caponegro, identified as one of Bruno's assassins, was found dead. He had been shot 15 times and stabbed in the back. His body was stuffed in a trunk, and $20 bills were littered around his body, a clear message that he was killed for his greed. On the same day, another body was discovered. This time it was Fred Salerno, dead of gunshot wounds, dumped in a vacant lot. He too had allegedly participated in Bruno's murder. Phil Testa had taken Angelo Bruno's place as boss. His reign was short. Almost a year after Bruno's execution, Testa was blown up entering his own home. Another boss killed without the blessing of the commission. Another avenging act would follow. Rocco Marinucci was next, found dead with fireworks stuffed in his mouth. A gesture designed to show that he was killed for the way in which he had killed Testa. If the Cosa Nostra was to flourish, all of its members had to comply with its rules. There were no exceptions. Gigante was believed to have ordered the murder of one of his own crime family members, Genovese soldier Jerry Papa had murdered 2 Colombo family members without permission. As punishment for his unsanctioned act, he was brutally shot and killed by members of his own criminal family. Had Gigante become the enforcer for the Northeast Cosa Nostra? Informers within the mob told federal agents that all of these killings had been ordered by Gigante. But information given by admitted criminals is always a problem for potential juries. Criminals will say anything if their cooperation can be traded for a reduced prison sentence. The FBI needed more than the words of criminals looking for a deal. Gigante knew this, and he protected himself accordingly. It seemed that Gigante was now the boss. The FBI began a more focused surveillance effort on Gigante. They learned that the Genovese family had also infiltrated several of New York's major industries: the garment trade, trucking, garbage collection, airport cargo handling, and the city's seafood industry. Vincent Gigante was known on the streets as the Chin, an abbreviation of Chinzino, Little Vincent. Fearing FBI surveillance and wiretaps, family members were not allowed to speak his name. They were to refer to him with hand signals, touching their chins to communicate his nickname. Bringing down the Chin was going to take every bit of know-how that the FBI could muster. They were going to have to create their own luck. As a surveillance team member watched one day, a telling crack in the Chin's ruse appeared. The seemingly frail man was being helped across a busy street. When oncoming traffic threatened, he became suddenly animated, racing to safety. His helplessness somehow overtook him again on the other side. Clearly, there were 2 Gigantes, the mentally troubled one displayed to the public, and the determined boss of the Genovese administration. The FBI would soon learn of a third. Gigante's ex-wife and their 5 children lived in New Jersey while he maintained a relationship with his long-standing companion, Olympia Esposito. He usually called on her late at night, looking quite dapper before he was aware of the surveillance.
We learned that he frequently visited a townhouse which was located up on 77th Street and the east side of Manhattan, where we later learned that a common law, he was living with his common law wife, and he had been married previously, and this was his second family there at this residence.
Soon the FBI knew all of the Chin's hangouts. This gave surveillance teams an opportunity to observe Gigante without his knowledge. A major break came when NYPD Organized Crime Task Force member Detective Tom Bruno was able to snap photos of some of Gigante's activities.
In 1984, I was assigned to a joint organized crime task force. That task force consisted of FBI agents and New York City police officers, detectives. And we were assigned to investigate the Genovese crime family. Then the next step was to go to Sullivan Street, where Chin Gigante lived. His apartment was above a pet store, alleged pet store. And he also had a social club on the block. And when you'd go by the social club, you'd see numerous people that were in the photos. And you'd see them standing in front of, going inside, and then sometimes crossing the street, going to the pet store, which was where the Chin, we believe, met people. Pet store really never had any kind of business that we could see. It had a little cat box in the window, and basically that was it.
More and more, Gigante was seen acting normally when he was unaware he was being watched.
I see Chin Gigante and I see Andrew Gigante, which is his son, come out of his residence. And I'm just minding my business, walking up the block. Andrew leaves to get in his car, and Chin is standing on the corner, and he wasn't helped out of his building, and he was standing on the corner. Andrew gets in his car, pulls out. As he pulls out, there's a car coming up Sullivan Street. It blows the horn. Chin Gigante yells, "Hey, what are you, in a rush?" As he does this, I come into the lighted area. He looks, sees me, and all of a sudden his head goes down, and he plays the sick point.
Another break followed Detective Bruno's surveillance successes. The FBI managed to rent an apartment close to the townhouse of Gigante's companion, Ms. Esposito. An agent would exit through a back door in the rented apartment building and position himself about 50 feet from Ms. Esposito's townhouse. From there, Ms. Esposito and Gigante could be seen from time to time. An agent watched the couple for 4 months between midnight and 2 a.m. Assistant U.S. Attorney Andrew Weissman, who later would have to prove Gigante's competency to stand trial, was delighted with the agent's observations.
And lo and behold, when he was inside in a place where he didn't think he was being observed, he did all of the normal things that any of us would do. As a matter of fact, what was unusual about those surveillances was that there was nothing unusual about him. He was normal. He was talking to people. He was counting money. He never wore a shoddy bathrobe. Indeed, the only time he was seen in a bathrobe was, not surprisingly, when he got out of the shower. He would wear a nice, fluffy, Brooks Brothers type bathrobe, which was not at all like the bathrobes that he would wear when he was on the street. So it became pretty obvious to the people conducting the surveillance that he was engaging in a concerted effort to give an appearance to the public that was false, that was not the way he behaved in real life.
Investigators continued to watch Gigante's bizarre public behavior. But photos themselves are only a single link in proving criminal activity. Investigators needed hard evidence to corroborate what the photos were suggesting, that Gigante was in fact the boss. One wiretap conversation between Genovese crew members gave investigators more proof of Gigante's position in the family. On the tapes, known Genovese members were complaining about the chin. Assistant U.S. Attorney George Stamboulidis reviewed these tapes to help prepare a case against Gigante.
He's constantly nitpicking his men, trying to always, with a million questions, drilling them and questioning them on what they're involved in. He's always looking to get money from them, or money from some of the schemes and how he earned, and how much money he would make from the gambling operations at the Triangle Social Club and things like that.
While Gigante micromanaged the internal affairs of his family, the tabloids began calling him the Odd Father.
He would check himself in to a hospital once a year for what his colleagues in the Mafia sarcastically referred to as tune-ups, so that he would have a paper trail showing that he had some, or giving the impression that he had some mental condition. And with the assistance of people around him and people in his family, he was able to cultivate this paper trail, giving the impression to anyone who looked at the cold medical records that here's someone who, year in, year out, was being treated for some form of mental illness.
Gigante knew how to protect himself, both publicly and privately.
Mr. Gigante was very clever in how he conducted business, and he limited his contacts with members of the family. If there were messages or items to be discussed regarding illegal activities conducted by the Genovese family, there would be messages passed on to people immediately surrounding him. Access to him was very limited. If the other family wanted to meet with him, more than likely they would have to send a message.
Gigante avoided the normal sit-downs or more formal meetings held regularly by other family bosses. He would take meetings when businesses demanded his attention. He and his visitors would stroll the sidewalks through the neighborhood, ensuring that surveillance wiretaps would not pick up any incriminating conversations. The always careful Gigante also suspected Ms. Esposito's phone was tapped, and it was. He never talked business on the phone. He would simply use a payphone or make arrangements to talk elsewhere. The FBI would not be able to use the Chin's own words to make a case against him. Other mobsters were not as smart. Sophisticated bugging operations were allowing the FBI to capture a multitude of other mob business on tape. In early 1985, the Justice Department was bearing down hard on a number of high-level organized crime figures. Most were being charged under the RICO Act. Though RICO had been around since the early 70s, it was only now receiving its first real test. Two of Gigante's men had gotten wind that the bosses of the Gambino and Lucchese families would soon be arrested. They wondered if the Chin was vulnerable. One commented that if he gets pinched, all those years in the asylum would be for nothing. On February 19th, the arrests of several crime family bosses were made. The next day, Vincent Gigante checked himself into the hospital and stayed a week. He had successfully avoided the indictment against the New York bosses. Among those arrested was Paul Castellano, head of the Gambino crime family. Prosecutors never brought him to trial. He was killed before they had the chance. By Cosa Nostra standards, the unsanctioned murders of Gambino boss Paul Castellano and his underboss Tommy Bellotti were unpardonable. Although John Gotti, a captain in the Gambino family, acted shocked at Castellano's death, it was widely believed that he was responsible. Within 2 weeks of the murders, Gotti had publicly taken over as boss. Vincent Gigante issued a subtle warning to Gotti. Without mentioning names, he told Gotti that the murderer would have to pay. It took 2 years, but in 1987, Gigante acted to avenge the murder of his friend and partner in mob business. Through his counselor, Bobby Manna, and some Lucchese family members, Gigante plotted to have Gotti killed. The planning session at a New Jersey restaurant was bugged, and because it was, the FBI saved John Gotti's life. If agents intercept information of a murder plot, they are required by law to try to prevent the killing. So based on the tape, agents warned Gotti. Acting on the FBI warning, John Gotti changed his plans on the day the murder was to take place. Because he was not where he was expected, the murder plot failed. Gigante, however, did not give up. He asked Vic Amuso, acting boss of the Lucchese family, to supervise another hit. It was up to Amuso and his men to work out the details.
And that was to have Amuso reach out to Al Diorco, one of his trusted men, just as Manna was one of Gigante's trusted men, and have Diorco use his contacts in other parts of the country to acquire a remote-controlled bomb.
But Gotti was arrested and imprisoned before the second plot could be carried out. He died of cancer while serving a life sentence for racketeering involving extortion and murder, including Castellano's. Meanwhile, the FBI had Chin's men on tape conspiring the murder. As the FBI's investigation into Genovese family operations continued, information about a corrupt construction scheme was coming to light. They learned that for years, much of the Genovese family income came from one segment of the construction industry, the window business. The family had managed to keep its hold on window replacement jobs for all of New York City's public housing projects.
We learned that at that time there was an enormous amount of money being put into refurbishing some of the New York City Housing Authority windows. There was an energy crisis underway, and the timing of this was ideal for the organized crime people to become more active in it. What we learned was that the Genovese family, along with 2 or 3 other families, were becoming involved in companies that were bidding and installing the windows in some of these housing projects. From the late 1970s up until the late 1980s, there was approximately $190 million worth of contracts given out by the city of New York for the window replacement industry.
It was classic mob business and a textbook example of racketeering. The Mafia took over an industry to the exclusion of legitimate businesses. Union officials were corrupted. In this case, Iron Workers Local 580. Bids were rigged, and companies or workers trying to play by the rules lost out. For years, the Lucchese and Genovese families operated their construction schemes autonomously. By the early 80s, they realized that a partnership would be much more profitable. By this time, the Lucchese family had a firm hold on Local 580, and the Genovese family had corrupted several contractors. They cooperated because it meant more business.
By using the Local 580 as a tool, they were able to exclude several contractors from coming in and bidding on some of these projects, and in essence created a somewhat of a monopoly for themselves.
On nearly all city housing authority work, and on much of the new construction for the city, the Genovese contractors and installers paid $2 a window. $1 went to the Lucchese family, 25 cents to the collector, and 75 cents to the boss for the family's role in handling the union. The other $1 went to the crooked union officials who looked the other way as jobs went to non-union workers. Refusal to cooperate often carried a penalty of violence. In the late 80s, a carpenters union delegate had both of his legs broken by Genovese men for refusing to cooperate, though he maintained that he was unable to get a good look at his attackers. And in 1992, a delegate from Local 580 was shot and killed coming out of his house on Long Island over a disagreement with his Cosa Nostra contracts. The Lucchese and Genovese family arrangement was working very smoothly. That is, until Peter Savino was persuaded to wear a wire. Savino was a Genovese soldier and point man for the window racket.
We built a case on him, a murder case on him, and it was sufficiently compelling that he realized, like many of these people, that he didn't want to die in jail. So what did he do? He decided to cooperate. And for an 18-month period, made tape recordings of people in the Genovese family and people in the Lucchese family operating this scheme.
Vincent Gigante didn't realize Peter Savino was turning on him. He was happy with Savino's work and satisfied with the window scheme's progression. Savino kept track of the money. He managed the contracts. He supervised the bids. He arranged the payoffs. The boss was happy, but some Genovese family members began to suspect Savino. When bodies were found in the basement of a building he owned, Genovese members were surprised that he was never seriously investigated by law enforcement.
As a result of that, people speculated, well, Savino wasn't arrested, yet these bodies were found in a building that's tied to him. Maybe he's cooperating, but nobody was really sure.
Savino was a cash cow for Vincent Gigante. He was bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars for the Genovese family every month. So when Gigante was told of Savino's betrayal, he chose not to believe it and initially refused to order him killed. Savino continued to wear the wire, trying to get other family members to acknowledge Chin and his position as boss of the family. Gigante's troops, however, could never be persuaded to break the boss's rule about not mentioning his name.
Remember Uniseal? Vincent had said when it came time to bid. Oh, okay, I'll mention him. He had said to go out and bid the work.
It was, don't mention that name. How can you talk like that? That was pretty damning proof. Even though it didn't give you a specific crime, it told you that this was a man to be feared. It was hardly somebody who was incompetent.
Shortly thereafter, it came to Gigante's attention that Savino was in fact cooperating. Furious at this betrayal, Gigante ordered the murder of Peter Savino. By that time, the FBI had relocated Savino well out of Genevieve's family reach, but not before he supplied agents with thousands of hours of taped conversations.
Mr. Savino was also in a position to provide us with the historical aspects of how the scheme developed, his relationship with the leaders of both the Lucchese and Genovese crime family, and what their participation was in this thing. Mr. Savino also was able to tell us how the various members of all of these families interacted with Local 580, which was used, again, as the tool to make the scheme work.
The FBI was successfully employing the RICO laws to bring down New York's most powerful bosses. As a result, high-ranking family members saw that their only way to avoid long prison terms was to cooperate. Among them were Gambino family underboss Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. Gigante was finally arrested and charged under the RICO laws with ordering 6 people murdered, conspiring to kill 3 others, and at least 24 counts of racketeering. In short, Gigante was charged with being the boss of the Genovese crime family. But Gigante still had his mental illness history to fall back on.
Mr. Gigante was indicted in May of 1990, and a second indictment was filed against him in June of 1993. The case against Mr. Gigante was unusual, that it spanned several years before it actually went to trial. He eventually went to trial in June of 1997. During that period of time, the issue that was before the courts was that whether he was competent to stand trial or not. That issue was finally resolved in 1996.
7 years after his arrest, a federal district judge declared Vincent Gigante competent to stand trial. Vincent the Chin Gigante was 69 years old when a jury convicted him of conspiring to kill 3 Mafia figures, including Gotti and Savino. He was also found guilty of extortion and union payoff conspiracies in the window replacement scheme. But jurors failed to convict him on charges of directly ordering 6 murders. Now that Gigante was convicted, his defense lawyers argued that he was not fit to be sentenced. They claimed he was too old, too frail, and too mentally incompetent to understand the punishment. While awaiting sentencing, Gigante was confined to a prison hospital and examined by several doctors. Gigante was given several PET scans, a procedure that uses a radioactive tracer to measure brain chemistry. A 1991 scan, first read as normal, was later found to be too flawed to use in diagnosis. A 1993 scan did show some abnormalities. But at least one expert, Dr. Jonathan Brody, judged these abnormalities as not consistent with dementia. Dr. Brody is an attending psychiatrist at New York's Bellevue Hospital and a professor at New York University's School of Medicine. He also conducts research on schizophrenia.
Mr. Gigante, at the time of the scan, was purportedly taking medication that affects the brain, And because it affects the brain, it affects brain chemistry, and brain chemistry is what a PET scan is all about.
Gigante was taking an antipsychotic medication and antidepressants, a low-potency tranquilizer, and sleeping pills. So Dr. Brody was skeptical about the PET scan, but had yet to examine the patient.
When the three of us entered the observation room, the examining room where he was then brought, I was struck at first by his appearance, which I said made me think, oh my God, he really is sick. I've missed the boat. He's really very sick. He came in wearing a bathrobe, he was shuffling, he was mumbling, he was making allusions to God.
But as the examination progressed, some of Gigante's actions began to raise doubts.
But one of the things that really struck me was that I didn't note at the time, but I noted a few seconds later, was when I put out my hand for him to shake it, he didn't shake it. And that's a very automatic behavior. You put your hand out, your worst enemy can put his hand out to you, and you tend to take it.
How about this way?
When Gigante was asked the names of his children, he didn't know. When he was asked where he lived, he didn't know.
And yet, these are things that people tend not to forget. You know, the brain in a dementia tends to work on the process of accounting. The last in, first out. So recent memory tends to be lost, but that's why people who are very demented can often remember very well events from long ago, even if they can't remember recent events. Well, he was not consistent on that. Indeed, he was asked the question about who the President of the United States was, which is a standard question on a psychiatric mental status evaluation. And he scratched his head and he looked perplexed and he said, I should know that. I should know that answer. It's in there somewhere. And some more questions were asked. He said, I really should know that. And then finally he said, Bush. George Bush. And I sat there and thought, oh, he remembered the question. What was striking was not that the answer was incorrect. What was striking was that the question was remembered despite all of the interfering questions.
And there were other red flags. He seemed to understand abstract concepts. Dr. Brody asked Gigante if he was proud of his children.
Now, pride is really quite an abstract notion. And his response was, yes, they're all working. Legitimate jobs. Legitimacy? Well, that wasn't even a question. Legitimate implies yet something else, that he was able to abstract from the question some intent as to what the question was involved with, and awareness of a distinction between legitimacy and illegitimacy. And here was a man who didn't know what month it was. He didn't know if he was in a hospital.
These and other inconsistencies contributed to Dr. Brody's conclusion that Gigante did not suffer from progressive dementia, vascular dementia, or schizophrenia. Guards assigned to watch Gigante during his pre-sentencing hospitalization also found his behavior normal. They testified that he was active around his prison hospital cell and polite to the hospital staff. He did not need help to shower, to groom himself, or to feed himself.
The lawyers all put in affidavits that they couldn't communicate with Vincent Gigante at all. Well, when he was in jail, he managed to speak with the prison counselors. When you sort of talk to the sort of low-level people in jail who have to take care of inmates on a day-to-day basis, it turns out He knew exactly what had happened. He knew he had been on trial. He knew that Gravano had testified against him and didn't have very nice things to say about him. He knew that his sentencing was upcoming. He knew what the issue was before Judge Weinstein as to that he had to decide that he was competent to be sentenced. It was completely at odds with what his lawyers were telling Judge Weinstein.
Some psychiatrists thought Gigante really was incompetent. Others thought he was faking. 5 months and dozens of tests later, the judge ruled. The judge said, "In short, the defendant's cognitive and emotional capacity and his communication skills are equivalent to other 69-year-old defendants with limited education. No hallucinations interfere with his abilities to participate in sentencing. He understands the fundamentals of criminal substantive law and procedure. He is deliberately feigning mental illness to avoid punishment which he fears. Defendant is competent to be sentenced and to serve an appropriate term in prison." Shaliro described efforts of the FBI and prosecutors as historic and courageous.
This has been a battle that certainly I've been involved with for the last 20 years, and certainly I think agents that will continue that on over the next 5 or 6 years. If the effort could be sustained and the resources maintained, I think we're on the verge of really reducing the effects and the impact of the Cosa Nostra.
To be sure, the government's legal victory in the Gigante case was partial. The jury, after all, failed to convict him of the 6 murder charges. He was originally sentenced to 12 years. In 2003, he pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and earned 3 more years, finally admitting in court that he had been faking insanity the entire time. In 1981, a witness told investigators of a double murder in Idaho. Near a trapper's camp, they found a game warden's body. A second warden's body was missing, along with the killer, Claude Dallas. Investigators would track the mountain man through unforgiving country he knew better than anyone. In an area known for anti-government sentiment, the FBI knew the manhunt would be difficult, but Dallas must be found.
The sun set on the Wild West long ago, but some people refused to notice. Claude Dallas was one of them. A wily trapper, distrustful of authority, Dallas typified the rugged individualism that forged this country. He went too far when he killed 2 game wardens in 1981. The law that he despised so much began to close in. But Dallas knew the land and could live off it as long as he needed to. Finding him wouldn't be easy. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. A man like Dallas could hide almost anywhere. The severity of his crime demanded that we never stop looking. A modern-day posse formed to round up the maverick and deliver him to justice.
On January 5th, 1981, Jim Stevens arrived at a friend's trapping camp, bringing provisions as promised. He fired warning shots to report his arrival. He knew his host didn't like being surprised by unannounced visitors. The trapper, Claude Dallas, had created the gunshot warning system. He was protective of his compound. Dallas was glad to have the supplies. He was trapping for the winter in Bull Basin, a remote area in southwestern Idaho near the Nevada border. He had bagged a few bobcats out of season and planned to sell their furs in the spring. But he needed food before that to sustain him. Besides restocking Dallas's camp, Stevens had come to look for Indian artifacts. He planned to search along the river. In such an isolated area, he was bound to find new items for his collection. Dallas stayed to look over his new provisions. Stevens was away for only a short time. Overhearing raised voices, Jim Stevens soon returned to the camp. He found his friend was not alone. Dallas was arguing with two game wardens, Bill Pogue and Conley Elms.
Oh, you got a gun, sir?
Stevens noticed Dallas's shoulder holster was empty. Though the wardens rarely met with trouble, few woodsmen were happy to see them. They requested Stevens' gun, following standard field procedure.
All right, talk to me again. Are you up here with him?
Yeah. He's just bringing
Pogue and Dallas argued about the bobcat skins hanging nearby. In Idaho, the season hadn't opened yet.
Season started 2 weeks ago.
I know where they came from. Nevada. Those aren't from Nevada.
Dallas's temper rose as he fumbled for an excuse. Their argument intensified. Pogue mentioned a citation, further angering the trapper. Then Warden Elms entered Dallas's tent to look for more contraband. Dallas became furious, insisting they needed a search warrant.
Sir, I said stop it.
Warden Pogue turned his attention to the tent. Suddenly, Dallas was firing a gun. He had drawn a .357 he had kept hidden and emptied it into the unsuspecting wardens. Without a word, Dallas reached for his .22 rifle and carefully aimed behind the ear of Bill Pogue. Conley Elms met the same fate. Jim Stevens was stunned. Dallas immediately claimed that Pogue had tried to draw his gun. Stevens had turned away just before the shooting began. He couldn't deny Dallas's claim.
You saw his hand on his gun. I swore last time I was arrested I'd never go in again.
But did you have to kill him?
But why would the warden have drawn? And why was Elms killed? Maybe his friend had gone crazy.
You find something to cover him up with.
Fearing for his life, Stevens decided it was best to cooperate. He complied with Dallas's orders. Using one of Dallas's mules, they hauled Bill Pogue's body up to the ridge where Stevens' blazer was parked. They dumped the body into the truck and returned to the camp. Conley Elms' body was too heavy for the mule to carry up the hill to the truck. Dallas first suggested they quarter him and haul the pieces. In the end, they dragged him almost half a mile across the rocky ground to the river. That would be Dallas's one mistake. He didn't weight the body. As it floated downriver, it was sure to be seen. As a trapper, Dallas knew about leaving tracks. He must cover his to make it hard on the investigators who would hunt him. Using kerosene, he burned the bloody spots left by moving the bodies. Stevens had to help. Dallas then built 2 small fires to burn the ropes used to move the wardens and some of the wardens' equipment. He tried to get rid of anything with blood on it. Dallas never expressed remorse for the killings. To Stevens, Dallas seemed without emotion. It was more reason to fear him. Dallas had to get rid of Bill Pogue's body. He decided to go to a friend's house in Nevada for help. Stevens didn't want to cross Dallas, and it might give him a chance to get away from the killer. They would head for Paradise Hill, Nevada, 5 hours away. As they drove, Dallas tried to convince Stevens that the killings were justifiable homicide. The wardens had invaded his territory and threatened him, he said. He'd only defended himself. Stevens couldn't understand how it was self-defense, but he didn't argue. There was no telling what Dallas might do to him. Near the end of their drive, Dallas apologized for involving Stevens. They arrived at the home of George and Liz Nielsen in Paradise Hill, Nevada, around 11 o'clock that night. The Nielsens ran a small tavern out of their house and were just closing for the night.
George! 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 George, it's Claude!
Dallas told his old friend George he had just killed 2 fish and game officers. He needed Nielsen's help. With others around, Jim Stevens no longer feared for his life. But what he had seen and done still terrified him. Dallas told George and Liz Nielsen he had one body outside and that the other was in the river near his camp. George Nielsen shared Dallas's contempt for the law, and he believed the claim of self-defense. He agreed to help. Dallas told Stevens he could go and asked to borrow the Nielsen's pickup to take Pogue's body out and bury it. The men went outside so Dallas could move the body from the Blazer to Nielsen's pickup.
Wait a minute.
Stevens could finally head home. Dallas went off alone to get rid of the body. Hours later, he would return to the Nielsens to shower, change clothes, eat, and pack. The Nielsens would give him food and some cash. Around 5:30 a.m., Nielsen would drop him off 15 miles away, where it is believed another friend picked him up. In any case, Claude Dallas had disappeared. A few hours later, Jim Stevens realized he had to go to the police.
Liz.
After talking with George, he visited Liz Nielsen at the local hospital where she worked. She agreed they should contact authorities. They were too involved not to.
We gotta turn him in.
They met with the county prosecutor. Stevens explained that he was there at the time of the shootings, but had his back turned when Dallas started firing.
Exactly what you saw.
We went down the river there.
He didn't see if Pogue had drawn his gun, so Stevens couldn't verify or dispute Dallas's self-defense story. George and Liz Nielsen told how they had helped Dallas disappear, but they didn't know where he was. All anyone knew was that for some reason, Claude Dallas had snapped. He was unpredictable, armed, and out there somewhere. If Stevens were telling the truth, there were 2 lawmen down and a killer on the run. The prosecutor contacted Owyhee County Sheriff Tim Nettleton, who called in state authorities.
I notified the Department of Law Enforcement to gain some assistance because of the expertise that they could supply my department.
As Nettleton prepared to investigate the crime scene to check Stevens' story, the FBI was called in to track Dallas. Special Agent Frank Nenzel, then stationed in Reno, was assigned as the Nevada case agent.
The FBI was called into the investigation of the murders of officers Pogue and Elms because it was believed that Dallas had, first of all, cold-bloodedly murdered these 2 officers, and secondly, that he had fled the state of Idaho to avoid prosecution.
We have thick wooded areas, we have water, and we have some open terrain.
Dallas knew the land and had a head start, but the FBI had to find him. Sheriff Tim Nettleton led the investigation of the crime scene where Claude Dallas had killed the 2 game wardens. He was accompanied by deputies and state forensics experts. An investigator riding in a news helicopter spotted a body in the river. He radioed to the team on the ground, and they located the body of Warden Conley Elms, caught on a submerged tree branch. At least one death was verified. Back in the camp, officers approached Dallas's tent with care, on the chance he was lying in wait for it. But only pelts and skins remained. With the area secured, Sheriff Nettleton and the forensics team could begin verifying the rest of Stephen's story. They couldn't rely solely on one witness's testimony. They needed hard evidence that placed Dallas at the scene and proved what happened beyond a reasonable doubt. Investigators videotaped and took photographs to preserve the placement of footprints and other evidence. They were most interested in collecting ballistic evidence. The examiners needed to retrieve the warden's guns and any spent bullets from them. The question was whether the wardens had fired or even drawn their guns. If they had, Dallas may be innocent of murder. Searchers found .357 and .22 caliber shell casings, which they hoped to be able to trace to determine who had fired them. Although evidence had been burned, much still remained. The scorched twigs might yield powerful clues.
In the process, we found where the sagebrush had been piled on human blood, later identified as Bill Pogue's and Conley Elms' blood, and burned, we assumed, to destroy the evidence.
It was painstaking work, but their meticulousness was crucial. Even the tiniest traces of evidence would be useful to Idaho State Crime Lab examiner Rick Groff.
There was a number of blood spots that were collected off of plants, off dirt, around a campfire, just in a number of locations.
The one eyewitness, Jim Stevens, cooperated fully. His testimony would help the Idaho Department of Law Enforcement's Harry Capall reconstruct the killings.
We took, the next day I believe it was, we took Stevens and went back down to the crime scene and had him walk us through, showing us where Elms was standing, where Pogue was standing, where he was standing, where Dallas was positioned, and we acted it out and photographed it.
Investigators were sure of what had happened, but they didn't know where Claude Dallas was or where he had hidden Bill Pogue's body. Local and state officers and civilian volunteers would look for the body. The news of the warden's murders galvanized the searchers. Most of them knew the 2 wardens and their families. Sheriff Gary Amon, then a dispatcher, was part of the search for the body.
It was Dallas being a cold-blooded cop killer. It was scary searching, but there was anger there that you wanted to help the family find the body so they could bury their loved one.
Many of the searchers knew the 30-square-mile wilderness that they'd be scouring. But there were dozens of abandoned mine shafts and gullies in which to hide a body. And Claude Dallas knew them all.
All right, let's move it. We're burning daylight.
They would use high technology, like infrared scanners. But most importantly, they would rely on their own patience and dedication.
They were very long days. They were cold days. We walked, we rode horses, flew in airplanes, flew in helicopters.
The FBI's manhunt team was charged with finding Dallas. The trapper could be anywhere. He was said to know every cave and gopher hole in the area where Idaho, Oregon, and Nevada meet. So the FBI wasted no time in blanketing the region with agents.
A specialized FBI force arrived in Winnemucca this morning, 12 members of the Bureau SWAT team out of San Francisco. They'll be evaluating and following up leads from several areas.
There were about 100 officers, including SWAT teams from California, Idaho, and Nevada. It was a posse ready for anything, because no one knew what the dangerous woodsman might do. While Special Agent Frank Nanzel coordinated the Nevada search, Special Agent George Calley of the Boise Field Office became the FBI's lead investigator.
The stories out on Claude Dallas early on seemed to be that he was a loner. He was one who was not too close to other people. He was a person who could live all by himself, could go off in the mountains and be totally independent.
Dallas projected the image of a storybook mountain man to those around him. It was a tale years in the making. Dallas was born on March 11, 1950 in Winchester, Virginia, the second son in a family of 9. When he was just a boy, his father taught him to hunt and lay a trap line, and that game laws didn't apply to them. The FBI learned that Dallas's name was already in their files for a draft dodging charge more than 10 years earlier. When he was 18, he had registered for the draft as required by law, then left his family and hitchhiked to California. Dallas found work as a ranch hand, though he had no experience. But he learned fast and soon became known for his hard work and for his distrust of the law. After several years, he moved on, perhaps unaware the FBI wanted him as a draft dodger. In 1973, the FBI caught up with Claude Dallas. They arrested him for failure to report for induction. But the draft board couldn't prove he had ever received his draft notices. They dropped the charges. It was his first victory over the government laws he despised. Dallas moved to Paradise Hill, Nevada. He decided to trade ranch work for the life of a trapper. He wanted to be completely independent. Before long, Dallas was making his living solely as a trapper in the Nevada wilds. Although he was licensed, his traps often violated state game laws for illegal bait. Legitimate trappers had little respect for his operation. Sheriff Nettleton knew Dallas's reputation.
Dallas was a trash trapper. He never took the time to go with a real trapper and learn how to trap.
As authorities investigated the man they were hunting for alleged murder, they uncovered a history of conflict with the law. In 1976, Nevada game warden Dale Elliott came across some of Dallas's illegally baited traps. Dallas used birds and animal parts to lure bobcats, whose skins brought a good price. But this improper bait also attracts animals like raccoons and skunks and kills them needlessly. Elliott confiscated the traps and fined Dallas $100. 2 years later, in 1978, another game warden, Gene Weller, came across more traps in Dallas's territory. They were illegally baited with chunks of meat and had no tags. Dallas couldn't be found, and since it was late, Weller decided to return the next day to look for him. The following morning, Weller and a sheriff's deputy found Dallas's Jeep. But again, Dallas couldn't be located. Inside the Jeep, they found 2 weapons, a rifle and a revolver. It was against Nevada law to keep a loaded rifle in a vehicle, so they confiscated it. They took the revolver, too. 2 loaded weapons in a possibly abandoned vehicle presented a dangerous situation. Anyone wandering nearby could take the firearms. The officers left a note for Dallas explaining where the guns would be held.
Name's Claude Dallas, here to get my guns.
3 days later, a disgruntled Claude Dallas arrived at the sheriff's office in Winnemucca, Nevada to claim his guns. They were now unloaded, and Dallas argued that the shells that had been inside were spent. The deputies couldn't produce evidence that the guns had held live rounds. The weapons were returned, and no fine was issued. It was another Dallas victory. Claude Dallas was a man who rejected the rules of society. But if his rules allowed for murder, the FBI had to bring him in. Within days of the two game wardens' deaths, FBI agents gathered information about the killer Claude Dallas. Special Agent George Calley led the investigation.
We realized that to find Claude Dallas, we had to learn more about him.
The FBI talked with local trappers and ranchers. Many were reluctant to help. The information on Dallas came slowly. As it did, the FBI pieced together the days leading up to the killing of the two game wardens. In December of 1980, a month before the killing of the wardens, Dallas had made a winter camp in the remote stretch of wilderness in Idaho's southwest corner. He would spend the winter trapping alone, but for a few visits from friends like Jim Stevens, who promised to bring mail and supplies. He chose Bull Basin for his camp. It was perfect for him. Wild, isolated country rich in deer and bobcat. A place where a man could live by his own rules. Dallas's closest neighbors were miles away. He knew other trappers sometimes worked Bull Basin, but he figured he could avoid them and the state's fish and game laws. But one day, his neighbor paid him a visit. Eddie Carlin owned the 45 Ranch, 12 miles away. He often trapped in Bull Basin, and he wanted to know who was working his territory. Carlin saw illegal bobcat furs in the camp. When he commented on them, Dallas said he didn't believe in man-made laws. Something about the trapper made Carlin uneasy.
Well, I got a long line out here. I run 45.
He nervously eyed Dallas's .357, a more powerful weapon than a trapper needs.
Any of these come off of the
Carlin made it clear his family had trapped in Bull Basin for years. Finally, they agreed to work separate areas of the basin.
I keep my property line squared away there. Okay.
They would stay off each other's turf. For the moment, Eddie Carlin was more concerned about a couple of trappers poaching on his 45 Ranch itself. In the Northwest, working another man's land is like stealing directly out of his pockets. Carlin drove 2 hours to the nearest phone to alert the Fish and Game Department. It was 10 p.m. on January 4th when Carlin reached Game Warden Bill Pogue. Pogue was known as a strict, by-the-books warden. Carlin knew he would help him clear his ranch of unwanted trappers.
All right, look, I'll see you in the morning.
Pogue understood Carlin's concern.
That would be great.
The poachers needed to be caught before they moved on to new territory. Pogue told Carlin he'd head out right away, but he needed to find a partner. He called 2 wardens who were unable to make the trip. Finally, he reached Conley Elms.
Yeah, Elms.
It was late, but when Elms heard the problem, he immediately agreed to go. The wardens arrived at the Carlins 45 Ranch at 3 a.m. on January 5th. After a few hours' rest in sleeping bags outside, the men joined Eddie and Joanne Carlin for breakfast. Eddie described the poachers who were trapping on his land. The wardens considered how to approach them. Then Joanne added that there was another man named Claude Dallas trapping in Bull Basin. He was bagging game out of season.
2 other guys camping right on the edge of my ranch.
Eddie told them to watch out for Dallas. The wardens said they'd cover each other. They left to confront the trappers on the 45 Ranch first. Jim Stevens arrived in Dallas's camp at mid-morning, then went off to look for artifacts, leaving Dallas alone. wardens entered the camp to check on the possible trapping violations.
Claude Dallas?
Yep.
Come out of the tent, please. Bill Pogue, Conley Elms, game wardens.
Dallas would later tell Stevens what happened next. The wardens asked Dallas for his gun. He surrendered one that the wardens had seen, but kept a second .357 pistol hidden.
20-mile trap line goes down into Nevada. I've got a license.
Let me see your licenses.
Dallas said the argument began after the wardens checked his trapping licenses. They asked about the pelts he had hanging up.
What's in the tent?
Pogue pressed Dallas about the bobcat furs, and Dallas's anger rose.
What about these pelts? These pelts came from here.
No, these are.
Hey, sir. Whoa, hey,
The tension quickly escalated,
You got a warrant?
He doesn't need a warrant.
This
Step
is
back.
my home.
Step back.
and in an instant, Dallas's temper turned deadly.
What you shooting for?
Perhaps what was most horrible was the way the wardens were executed.
Oh.
Sheriff Nettleton understood the implication of the shots to the head.
That shot behind the ear was to finish him off, and is a common way of administering death by a trapper.
Clearly, Dallas considered the wardens no more than animals stumbling into one of his traps. The cold, terrible nature of the crime didn't faze Dallas. Unshaken, he tried to cover his tracks, intimidating Jim Stevens into assisting him. Then he vanished. Within 48 hours, the hunt for Bill Pogue's body by local volunteers had begun.
Team number 2 in this direction. Team number 3 off in this direction.
Elm's body had been found, and the story Jim Stevens recounted was proving to be true. The other warden was still missing. Local and state authorities used every tool at their disposal, including Sheriff Nettleton's airplane. The aerial search allowed for initial sweeps of large areas to be conducted quickly. It was necessary in such a vast expanse of territory. Freshly dug earth or other signs of Claude Dallas's actions may have been visible from the air. But finding a body would require a slow, careful ground search, too, by a team that included Sheriff Gary Amon.
When we actually went down and searched for the body, approximately 50 or so people went down. We camped out near Paradise Valley, and we would break up into teams, and we'd go search a specific designated area that we were assigned to, and we would basically turn over every rock and look under every brush for signs of a grave or footprints, bodies, whatever, any evidence that might be related to this case.
As local authorities searched for Pogue's body, the FBI hunted Claude Dallas. He could be anywhere, from the Northwest to Mexico or beyond. Dallas was on his own turf, and the manhunt promised to be long and frustrating. Agent George Kelly and the other investigators knew that to find Dallas, they'd have to narrow the search.
We had to contact the people that he had seen in the past, and we began to get an idea of the type of person he would look up by those who had similar interests that he did. And we really concentrated on who are his friends.
Investigators knew Dallas had friends in Paradise Hill, Nevada, so they focused there, checking homes, barns, and other buildings. Agents learned Dallas kept many of his belongings in a converted trailer behind George Nielsen's bar. When agents searched it, they discovered nearly 20 weapons and some combat training manuals. It was further evidence they were hunting a man who was dangerous and knew how to kill. Inside Nielsen's bar, the FBI questioned everyone who knew Dallas. The Nielsens were helpful, telling the FBI the same information they had given the county prosecutor earlier. But others in the bar were largely uncooperative. Not many locals appreciated federal intervention. They gave agents few leads. It was clear people were protecting Dallas, either because they liked him or because they disliked the law. The federal agents weren't the only ones getting the brush off. Even local authorities like Harry Capall felt the frustration.
Some of the anti-establishment type people said the two officers deserved to be killed. They had no business being down invading this man's camp, but there were quite a few people in the Winnemucca area who really weren't too helpful, and I think our investigation would have proceeded a lot faster and quicker had they have been more willing to come forward, or if we did interview them, tell us the truth.
The fact that Dallas had a network of supporters in Nevada and Idaho gave agents the first glimpse behind his mountain man facade. It seemed he was not the self-sufficient loner some made him out to be. He was resourceful, but he was also dependent on others. The field work by agents like Frank Menzel slowly uncovered the truth about Claude Dallas.
He wasn't earning any money, so he had to have some way to eat and sleep and that sort of thing, or a place to go to hide. So he was able to avoid us because he did have some friends, not only in the state of Nevada, but Northern California, where he had relatives.
As investigators learned how Dallas operated, they figured out how to bring him out of hiding. They'd make the reclusive backwoodsman the best recognized man in the West, so he'd have to come home to hide. They designed and distributed a wanted poster and put a $20,000 reward on Dallas's head. Sheriff Nettleton called it the poster war.
I had requests from so many police agencies, all the way from Alaska, all up and down the West Coast. They were in Field and Stream. Virtually every gun shop west of the Mississippi had one hanging up. And any place that Mr. Dallas went, he would see his face. Any of his haunts, any of his friends would see it.
This would leave him only one place to hide, back in Paradise Hill, where most of his supporters were. Investigators kept the pressure on, following every lead, searching every day, and waiting for Dallas to resurface. After 15 months, agents noticed the people of Paradise Hill becoming uneasy. They acted nervous when any law officer was nearby. The agents worked their contacts and learned that Claude Dallas was coming back to town. FBI agents persuaded a friend of Dallas's to turn informant and notify them when Dallas actually returned. In April of 1982, the informant came in to talk. He didn't want any trouble. Claude Dallas had moved in with a friend, he said. He was at Craig Carver's trailer just outside of Paradise Hill. There were plenty of weapons in the trailer. Within 12 hours, the arrest team had assembled and was ready to raid Carver's trailer. They had to act fast. There was no room for error. On Sunday, April 18, 1982, the FBI made their move on Claude Dallas. They descended upon his quiet, remote hiding spot. With air and ground support, the SWAT team quickly positioned themselves for the raid. They knew Dallas was an expert marksman and that he would be heavily armed. Special Agent George Calley was at the raid.
And I well recall the announcement that this is the FBI, and Claude Dallas come out, words to this effect. And he did, he came out.
But not the way they expected. Dallas dived through the window of the trailer and went to a truck. Agents were momentarily helpless to stop him. The arrest team mobilized and the chase was on. The FBI had spent more than a year tracking the cop killer. They could not let him get away. Cruisers and the helicopter stayed on his tail despite the danger. Dallas was shooting from his truck as he sped along. Agents and officers returned fire as they chased him. He seemed unstoppable, even bulletproof. But then his luck ran out. His truck stopped dead. The shooting stopped too. Dallas had been shot. He slipped out of his truck and crawled away. Men on the ground couldn't see him through the tall brush, but from the air, Nanzel had a bird's eye view. Unfortunately, with the agents out of their vehicle, he had no means of radio contact with them. So he was helpless to warn them.
When I saw that agent walking toward Dallas, this agent was a very highly trained special agent SWAT team leader named Dave Gillen out of Las Vegas. I didn't think he saw Dallas, and I thought there could be, I thought Dallas could have killed him right there. And it really scared me badly.
But as the agents approached, to everyone's surprise, Dallas lifted his arms and gave up. He was transported to a nearby hospital for treatment. The FBI had their man. Frank Nanzel breathed a sigh of relief.
Dallas told us he could have killed the agent that was walking toward him. And I said, thanks for not killing him.
With Claude Dallas secure behind bars, prosecutors began to build their case against him.
This morning, investigators went through Dallas's belongings looking for evidence to help in prosecuting him. Items searched included traps, pelt stretch boards, clothing, and 8 guns.
I believe there is a possibility that we could have the homicide weapon, but we don't know.
How many weapons are you looking for?
We're looking for one particular weapon.
But you're specifically looking for the gun that Claude used to shoot?
We're hoping it might be in this bunch.
At the Idaho State Forensics Lab, examiners tested the weapons confiscated from Dallas's trailer. They hoped to find the guns used to execute the wardens. But the tests were inconclusive. Prosecutors would have to rely on other forensic evidence and the testimony of Jim Stevens to earn a conviction. When Claude Dallas was released from the hospital, he was booked at the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, then flown back to Winnemucca, Nevada.
When they had Dallas in custody and got back to the airport in Winnemucca, it was just a feeling of relief. Hey, it's over with. Now let's get him tried.
Authorities were taking no chances. Security at the Owyhee County Courthouse was bolstered for Dallas's arrival.
From the first day of the trial, the courthouse was jammed with spectators, split into pro and anti-Dallas camps. His most vocal advocates were the so-called Dallas cheerleaders.
During the trial, there was a group, mostly ladies, that were openly antagonistic towards any law enforcement, that thought Mr. Dallas was cute and being railroaded. Didn't mind telling anybody that we had no business prosecuting him.
The prosecution expected an easy conviction on first-degree murder charges. They had a witness to the crime, forensic evidence, and a defendant who eluded capture for over a year. But it wouldn't be easy. Whether it was the strong defense or Dallas's charisma, after 7 days of deliberation, the jury reached a shocking verdict. Instead of the maximum charge of first-degree murder, they found Claude Dallas guilty of 2 lesser charges of voluntary manslaughter. If the jury was beguiled by Dallas, the judge was not. He gave Dallas the maximum sentences he could, a total of 30 years. During the trial, Dallas finally gave up the location of Bill Pogue's body. This provided some relief to the people who had searched the wilderness for months. Still, many felt justice had not been done.
We were shocked that Dallas got away with this because he had cold-bloodedly murdered 2 very fine Idaho officers, and not only murdered them, but shot them in the back of the head like they were just animals that he caught in a trap. And I thought that it was the worst decision. There was no justice. I felt bad for law enforcement, but I really felt bad for Pogue and Elm's family. I thought that was just tragic.
Bill Pogue's body was recovered from a shallow grave about 15 miles southwest of Paradise Hill, Nevada. And Claude Dallas began serving his time at the Idaho State Penitentiary. But the ordeal was not over. After 3 years in captivity, on Easter Sunday, 1986, he once again became a fugitive. Agents believed a woman from Reno who had befriended him brought him wire cutters on a visit. He used them to cut through the prison fence. It seems she also provided the getaway car. Dallas was now an escaped killer, and the manhunt team responded with full force. The FBI placed him on their list of 10 most wanted fugitives at the request of Special Agent George Calley.
We knew could be difficulty in finding him, that should get him on the top 10. Knew that getting this publicity, not only nationwide, but worldwide, and our wanted flyers that go out.
Special Agent Nenzel welcomed the top 10 listing.
You have the backing of the entire FBI, more so than you would in just a regular case. I mean, we have all the equipment, helicopters, planes, technical advice, laboratory, SWAT teams, people that are able to do all kinds of things will help you on a solid lead on an FBI top 10 fugitive case.
The media also turned more attention to the case, generating more leads. The search was off to a strong start. Hopes were high when agents quickly located the car allegedly used in the escape. Forensics examiners processed it for prints. It may lead them to the escapee. But he had left no trace of himself. A few months after Dallas's escape, agents had a hot tip on his whereabouts. He was hiding in the small mining town of Eureka, Nevada. Under cover of darkness, Vegas and Reno SWAT teams arrived for the raid. They threw a device called a flashbang through the front door to stun anyone inside and send up a smoke screen to cover agents when they entered. Would the fugitive Claude Dallas finally be brought to justice? SWAT team members searched the house for Claude Dallas, but he had slipped away again. Maybe the agents had been in the small town too long and word had gotten out. In any case, Dallas was gone. It would be several more months before agents got their best break, almost a year after his escape from prison. They had been following another of his friends, Danny Martinez, who lived in the ranching community of Riverside, California.
have any right to come in here and ask for mine.
Martinez had a friend who looked a lot like Dallas, and he talked the friend into giving Dallas his ID. The friend was uncomfortable with the arrangement.
This guy just came to
He
my
called the
door
FBI and agreed to help
me
them.
out of my ID.
Meanwhile, Dallas fled to Mexico using the ID. He cut his hair, shaved his beard, and got a nose job. He had a new look, but he hadn't changed his pattern. As before, he returned to where his friends were, as agents predicted. When Claude Dallas returned to Riverside, Martinez had the informant take Dallas to a motel. The friend quickly alerted the FBI. Knowing Dallas was inside, a SWAT team assembled at the convenience store across from the motel. He was surrounded and he was unarmed, so he could not fight back this time. Claude Dallas was once again in custody.
Anyone will be appointed for you.
He was transported back to Idaho to stand trial. The charge was escaping from a state penitentiary. It seemed certain he would be found guilty. But again, he worked his magic on the witness stand. He claimed prison officials had concocted an elaborate scheme to kill him because they saw him as a cop killer. Amazingly, the jury bought his story, baffling agents like Frank Nanzel.
Dallas was acquitted from escape, which totally astounded every FBI agent I ever knew that worked on this case, or any agent that ever heard about this case. It just was beyond belief that Dallas could escape from prison and then go to trial for that and be acquitted.
Claude Dallas, who admitted killing 2 law officers, seemed somehow charmed when it came to prosecution.
But this time, he got off of his draft dodging. He got off of shooting 2 officers. Now he gets off of escape because the authorities are mean to this poor little boy. That's been his defense every time.
But Dallas was defeated. He lost the year reduction in his sentence he had earned for good behavior, and he was returned to prison to serve the remaining 27 years of his term. Sheriff Gary Amon saw through Dallas's false image.
Claude Dallas to me was a wannabe cowboy loner that wasn't near as tough as he thought he was.
Harry Capall agrees.
I don't think ever earned the right to be called a mountain man or a trapper. He was nothing more than a thief and a murderer.
Following the game wardens' deaths, their widows initiated the construction of a memorial to Idaho's fallen officers. The monument stands as a testimonial to the true heroes of the West, those men and women sworn to uphold and protect the law.
FBI, freeze! Get down on the ground!
A family vanishes without a trace. Local authorities find no leads to the identity of their abductors. When stolen weapons began to surface, investigators realized the perpetrators were part of a nationwide rampage of violence. They were dangerous men who would stop at nothing to escape justice.
When a family was murdered in Arkansas, it seemed like an isolated event. But soon the crime was revealed to be part of an ever-widening circle of violence that defined a new age of domestic terrorism. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. For the killers, The triple homicide in Arkansas was simply a means to an end. They made their way across the country, letting nothing stand between them and their twisted mission. And we would stop at nothing to prevent their rampage.
January 1996. Tilly, Arkansas, a small rural neighborhood, was home to William Mueller. Mueller was a gun enthusiast and self-employed electrician. His wife Nancy homeschooled their 8-year-old daughter Sarah. Returning from a day of work, the Muellers were confronted by 2 men in their home.
Hands behind your back! Hands behind your back, ma'am, now!
They were dressed as FBI agents, but they were imposters. They were after the large supply of weapons and cash that Mueller had in his home. When the 52-year-old Mueller refused to cooperate, the intruders separated the family and tortured them. Nancy Mueller's mother, Earlene Branch, grew concerned when she hadn't heard from her daughter in 2 weeks. She turned to the sheriff for help.
I usually hear from her at least.
She explained that the family often traveled to gun shows, yet her daughter always called when they returned.
This is unusual.
Although the Muellers lived in a neighboring county, the sheriff knew the family and agreed to look into the matter. He checked with local authorities and talked to Mueller's neighbors. Though Sheriff Jay Winters found no trace of the family, people who knew them weren't concerned.
For the most part, there wasn't a lot of fear. Most people thought, you know, maybe they had just gone off somewhere and wanted to be on their own for a while.
On February 11th, a month after their disappearance, a farmer found the Mueller's Jeep concealed and abandoned off the highway, miles from their home. Detective Aaron Duval from the Pope County Sheriff's Office was sent to investigate.
It was approximately 20 miles north of Russellville, off the State Highway 7, hid behind a brush pile. I was called out that day, went up there, took pictures of the vehicle and the trailer.
Inside the Jeep, Duval found Nancy Mueller's purse. It held her wallet and ID. The trailer, used by Bill Mueller to transport munitions to gun shows, was empty. Several more months passed, and the Muellers were still missing. 40 miles from Tilly, an elderly couple enjoyed a day of fishing in a bayou near Russellville. While waiting for a fish to bite, the woman snagged her line. She pulled up an old tennis shoe. A leg bone jutted out of it. Horrified, she cut it loose and went for help. Within hours, search teams combed the bayou organized by Sheriff Winters. They used large metal hooks to drag the bottom. Divers swam the depths. By day's end, parts of a single body were recovered, a murder victim.
The torso had a rock attached to it. There was a lot of tape on it. The head had a bag of some type on it, duct tape around the head. Very disturbing to us because it was obvious, you know, that this was a different type of thing than we typically deal with. It was an obvious execution. It was just some cold-hearted people.
Investigators determined it was the body of a small female. They thought it might have been a 6-year-old girl who had been abducted several counties away the previous year. When the clothing and size didn't match her description, another possibility became apparent. It could have been Sarah Mueller. The next day, 2 more partial bodies were found. All 3 torsos had been weighed down with rocks, and each head was covered with a plastic bag secured with duct tape. Dental records, DNA, and clothing confirmed the identity of the bodies. They were William Mueller, his wife Nancy, and their daughter Sarah. The missing persons case was now a grisly triple homicide investigation.
It was bad for Bill and Nancy to have to die the way they did. But for a 7-year-old girl to die that way, to be wrapped with plastic, to be wrapped with duct tape, to have a 60-pound rock strapped to her body and thrown into a lake, there was no excuse.
During the autopsy, the coroner determined that the 3 had probably been in the water since January 11th, the last day they were seen. A later examination revealed several specks of blue paint stuck to the tape that bound the bodies. Investigators sent the paint specks to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. for analysis. A forensic chemist determined that they were consistent with auto paint. The challenge was to match them to a specific make and model. Using infrared light, the examiner established the chemical composition of the paint. This chemical signature was fed into a computer database containing similar information from every auto make, model, and color dating back to 1934. The results gave the Arkansas investigators their first lead.
So we thought that the vehicle that the bodies were transported in possibly was blue. It was determined a particular blue color, metallic blue. The FBI even narrowed it down that it was a General Motors vehicle.
Investigators reasoned that they were looking for at least 2 perpetrators. One must have driven the blue car with the bodies in it to the water, while the other followed in the Mueller's Jeep. By the time they dumped the bodies, the Muellers were probably already dead, suffocated by the plastic bags. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms from Little Rock, Arkansas was called in. ATF agent Glenn Jordan headed the case.
Our jurisdiction lay in the fact that Mueller was a former federal firearms licensee, that his firearms were missing, and the fact that Mr. Mueller and his family had been murdered.
The ATF had a complete record of Mueller's gun inventory before he forfeited his federal license. With no reports of gun sales since then, agents figured the missing weapons had been stolen.
Our goal was to enter the serial numbers of those firearms into the National Crime Information Computer. In case those firearms turned up later, that would give us a lead to follow in the investigation.
Jordan was already familiar with Bill Mueller's name since the family had been the victims of a theft 1 year earlier. At the time of that robbery, Mueller reported $40,000 worth of merchandise stolen, including 5 firearms and ammunition. Since the Muellers had been victims of a robbery and homicide within the same year, agents believed that the family had been targeted by a group who used and sold stolen weapons, perhaps members of an anti-government militia.
Come on in, fellas.
Investigators returned to inspect the Muellers' belongings. After the family had disappeared, relatives had taken most of their valuable items. The landlord stored the remaining possessions in his garage. They found a Colt .45 gun case labeled with a serial number, but the gun was missing. They also found a picture of the family with some friends. The ATF entered the serial number of the Colt .45 into the NCIC, the National Crime Information Center. They got a hit. The handgun had been traced to a man named Travis Brake. He had been arrested 5 months earlier in Seattle, Washington for carrying a concealed weapon. Because the gun he was carrying was now linked to another crime, Brake was arrested again by the Seattle police, this time for possession of a stolen weapon. Jordan and Duval flew to Washington State to question him.
Mr. Brake was interviewed and advised the Seattle Police Department that he had purchased this handgun at a gun show in Seattle, Washington, and he described 2 individuals that he had purchased the firearm from, one in particularly that he remembered.
Investigators showed him the photograph found among the Mueller's possessions. Brake identified one of the men who sold him the gun.
That's him, right here.
His name was Keith Collins. Agents asked Bill and Nancy Mueller's friends if they had ever heard of him. Collins had once been close with the Muellers. They had attended gun shows together. Investigators discovered that Keith Collins' real name was Kirby Kehoe. The ATF learned that Kirby Kehoe had an extensive record for firearms violations. Kehoe was also actively involved in the white supremacist movement. Members of this growing faction are strongly anti-government, heavily armed, and considered dangerous. Kirby Kehoe became a prime suspect in the Mueller triple homicide. Investigators needed more evidence before they moved in for an arrest. Almost a year after the triple murder and robbery of Bill, Nancy, and Sarah Mueller, investigators were still hunting for the killers, believed to be militant white supremacists. In Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 11 months after the crime, a trooper noticed a blue Chevy Suburban parked in a handicapped space. He found a young couple sleeping inside. The man said his name was Sean Haynes.
Got any code?
He and his pregnant girlfriend had pulled over to rest for a while. From the bumper stickers on his truck, the trooper believed he was a white supremacist. He asked Haynes if he was carrying any weapons. Haynes showed him 2 guns in the back of his vehicle. The trooper called in the serial numbers and discovered they had been stolen. One, an AR-15 rifle, had been taken from the Mueller's house in Arkansas. Haynes was arrested. Alerted that one of Mueller's guns had turned up in South Dakota, investigators from Arkansas went there to interview Haynes. Haynes revealed that he had traded another firearm for the AR-15 rifle at a Washington State motel 6 months earlier.
Can you explain how they got there?
The name of the man he swapped with was Chevy Kehoe, Kirby Kehoe's eldest son. Now Chevy was also connected to the Mueller murders. Investigators weren't through with Haynes, though. They took a paint sample from his blue Suburban. They determined that the sample did not match the paint found on the duct tape wrapped around the Muellers. Haynes had nothing more to offer. The investigation turned to Chevy Kehoe, but he was nowhere to be found. Several weeks later, Ohio State Highway Patrol Officer Harold Harker had a routine assignment: to catch speeders in the small town of Wilmington, not far from Cincinnati. While observing traffic, he noticed a blue Chevy Suburban going slower than the speed limit. Harker, a 25-year veteran who was now retired, recalled how he thought the people inside were acting strangely as they drove by.
As it approached, I saw it did not have a front license plate, and as it passed me, the driver didn't acknowledge my presence in any way, didn't look at the patrol car, just kept both hands on the wheel, fixed straight ahead. However, the passenger not only looked at me as he went by, he actually turned in the seat and looked out the rear window to watch me.
Harker knew that Washington State required vehicles to have license plates on both front and back. He called in the plate number and followed the Suburban while waiting for his dispatcher to come back with some information.
And they returned and told me that the plate apparently did match the vehicle, however it was expired. So at that point I made the determination that once we got into Wilmington where the berms were wider, I would initiate a traffic stop there.
Harker's car was equipped with a video camera mounted on the dashboard. A microphone was fastened to Harker's shirt. Harker asked the passenger and driver for ID. While talking to the men, Harker became more troubled. Neither had any ID. The driver was speaking in a very animated fashion, while the passenger looked straight ahead.
At this point, I was concerned enough with my safety and so on. I wanted to get the people away from the vehicle, and I wanted to, here again, get them separated, get the driver into my car so that I'm a little more in control of their actions.
Let's sit back here with me a second, sir.
The driver eventually followed Harker to his patrol car.
You say you borrowed the vehicle? You say you borrowed the vehicle?
It's actually what I'll tell you what the process is.
Okay.
When the officer tried to frisk him, the driver quickly stepped back and became defensive.
And he actually moved away from me and used the terminology, "I don't want to be violated like that." In 25 years of criminal patrol operations, I had never had anyone use that particular terminology. And that, coupled with the appearance of the two young men, the fact that they had close-cropped military-style haircuts, very clean cut, and the driver had a Marine Corps type cover, I felt comfortable that I was probably dealing with militia personnel at that point.
Across the highway, a fellow officer, Deputy Sheriff Robert Gates, saw Harker talking with the driver and turned around to assist him. This was a common practice, since officers often worked alone in rural sections of the state.
His whole purpose is to monitor the entire situation. He doesn't get involved with answering questions, giving direction. That's my job. His job is purely to watch and observe.
The men told him they were looking for work on construction sites. Harker told the driver that if he or his passenger could not provide identification, their vehicle would be confiscated. The driver attempted to escape. As both officers tried to apprehend him, the passenger jumped from the vehicle and started firing. The passenger fled the scene while Harker tried to stop the driver. His arm became caught in the door, but he managed to free himself. The other suspect escaped into the woods. Gates pursued him. He feared an ambush among the dense trees, so he turned around. Harker, back at his car with a shot-out tire, called for help. Within moments, the rest of the Wilmington, Ohio Police Department was notified about the shootout. Officer Robert Martin heard the bulletin and then observed a Suburban in an electrical supply company parking lot. He called in his location as he went to investigate.
We took off from only 10-6 with that suspect vehicle behind the building supply.
The Suburban's driver opened fire. Another policeman arrived to assist him. The suspect had disappeared into the industrial area. He'd shot 32 rounds. One wounded a bystander. Back at the first shootout site, investigators were trying to piece together what happened and to learn the shooters' identities. Using metal detectors, they searched for shell casings. The entire area was meticulously photographed and all evidence collected. The small town of Wilmington had never seen anything like this. Police mobilized a manhunt for the two armed suspects. The search continued into the night. Reinforcements were brought in from neighboring counties. Police knew the suspects would resort to violence in order to escape. They had to find them before anyone was killed. The suspects in the shootout were still at large. The ATF and Ohio State Police examined the second gunfight location in the Chevy Suburban. The entire crime scene was processed for fingerprints in hopes of determining the shooter's identity. Inside the vehicle were assault rifles, thousands of rounds of ammunition, military supplies, and medical packs. Investigators traced the munitions through receipts supplied by the manufacturers. Much of the ammo and gun parts belonged to the murdered Arkansas gun dealer, William Mueller. The extent of the military supplies suggested the shooters were violent members of an anti-government group. Ohio investigators notified the FBI. FBI agent Bill Hargraves from the Cincinnati field office spearheaded the investigation.
The case became a domestic terrorism case, basically because of the items that were found in the Suburban. They had numerous weapons, ammunition, law enforcement, clothing and equipment, law enforcement identification.
Yes, this is Trooper Herman with Ohio State Police.
Ohio State troopers traced the Suburban's registration to a man named Jacob Settle from Spokane, Washington. On the day of the shootout, Settle told the trooper he was with friends in Washington State, more than 2,000 miles from Ohio. He also claimed that he had sold the vehicle to a man named Chevy Kehoe. It would take several days for authorities to corroborate Settle's story. Ohio State troopers compared a copy of Settle's driver's license photo against images of the fugitives caught on tape. The picture didn't match. The videotape was their best clue. Ohio State Police released the tape nationwide to try to find the shooters' identities. The shootout video made primetime news around the country and produced the break investigators needed. A Washington State TV reporter recognized the driver as a white supremacist she had interviewed several years earlier for the TV show Hard Copy. His name was Chevy Kehoe. Several cops and residents confirmed the identification. Back in Arkansas, Pope County investigators working on the Mueller triple homicide also watched the video. For the first time, they saw Chevy Kehoe. They assisted Ohio State and federal investigators in the manhunt, since Chevy was also a suspect in the Arkansas murders. Duval and Jordan traveled to Ohio to meet with FBI agent Hargraves to share information. They told Hargraves that the killers used a blue General Motors vehicle to transport the victims. Hargrave thought the connection was strong, since the truck abandoned after the shootout was a blue Chevy Suburban, and more of Mueller's property was found inside. The team agreed that if paint scrapings from the Suburban matched the blue paint specks found on the victims, they would have forensic evidence tying Chevy Kehoe to the Arkansas crimes. At the FBI lab in Washington, D.C., examiners determined that the paint specks did not match the sample found in Arkansas. FBI agent Jim Shenandoah was called in, a specialist in tracking domestic terrorists like Chevy Kehoe.
We found out that they had engaged in militia-type activities, that they had anti-government views. They were very anti-law enforcement at the time. So it really heightened the security in terms of what these suspects were going to do next.
Seeking more information on Chevy Kehoe, a Washington State trooper interviewed his father, Kirby, at his home in Colesville. The trooper asked him if he recognized the men in the video. Kirby did not identify his son Chevy, but he said the second man was his younger son Shane.
We found this unusual because the video made it fairly easily to identify the driver, who was Chevy, but not quite as easy to identify Shane. We thought that perhaps there might have been some favoritism for one son over the other.
The FBI looked into the background of 23-year-old Chevy and 21-year-old Shane Kehoe.
Chevy Kehoe was linked to a variety of crimes. In addition to the 3 murders in Arkansas, he was linked to a murder in Washington State and a murder we believe, in Idaho. He also committed a series of burglaries, robberies, and extortions, and also interstate transportation of stolen property.
APBs were issued for the Kehoe brothers. On February 18th, investigators picked up the Kehoe's trail in Frankfort, Ohio, 45 miles from the shootout site in Wilmington. A Chevy Monte Carlo was found abandoned in a grocery store parking lot. It had been reported stolen a mile from where the shootout occurred. Authorities suspected that at least one of the Kehoes had stolen it to escape the manhunt. The keys were all the robber had left. Investigators feared the desperate brothers would stop at nothing to escape custody. State police fanned out to canvass the area, hoping someone may have seen one of the fugitives. A mile away at the Lake Hill campground, the Kehoe's path reemerged. Investigators learned that the pair had camped there with their families in an RV, but authorities arrived too late. Just 2 days earlier, the motorhome had pulled out. No one knew if the brothers were on board. The FBI released a nationwide APB for the vehicle. As the weeks passed, people reported sightings of the RV. They had also seen women and children in the camper. Each time authorities responded, the camper was gone. The Kehoe's trail heated up again 150 miles away in Indianapolis, Indiana, where another stolen vehicle was recovered. Inside, investigators found clothing and a gas receipt signed by Chevy Kehoe, but no trace of his brother Shane. The van had been stolen 13 miles from where Chevy fled the blue Suburban after firing on Ohio officers. The Kehoes were still one step ahead. The trail of plundered cars signaled that the Kehoes' crime spree would not cease until authorities stopped them.
There it is. We felt early on that if confronted again by law enforcement, that there would be a great probability that there would be another shooting involved and that innocent people would be hurt.
Across the country, local and federal investigators were put on high alert. They needed to find the Kehoe brothers before they struck again. In Arizona, a state trooper came upon an RV that fit the description of the Kehoe's camper. It had no license plates, and its shades were drawn. He called in reinforcements. He knew the brothers were armed and dangerous and would shoot to kill. Within moments, a SWAT team surrounded the RV. They hoped the nighttime assault would catch the Kehoes off guard and lessen the chances of another armed confrontation. An Arizona SWAT team was on the move to catch the Kehoe brothers, armed fugitives wanted in 2 states for murder and attempted murder.
Freeze!
They thought they had them cornered. It was the wrong RV. Several days later, a Wyoming highway patrolman found the Kehoe's mobile home broken down and abandoned on a desolate stretch of road. The FBI was informed and asked that the RV be towed into town for inspection. The Wyoming State Police obtained a warrant and documented its contents. This vehicle, like the Suburban, held a large cache of ammunition, guns, several fake FBI jackets, and U.S. Marshals badges. One discovery stopped the officers in their tracks.
Hey, come take a look at this.
A box of explosive components, including batteries used to detonate bombs. Fearing a booby trap, the troopers called in the ATF bomb squad. Nearby business and government offices were evacuated. Inch by inch, the bomb squad probed the RV. The thorough investigation revealed no live devices. But the danger wasn't over. According to ATF agent Jordan, the Kehoe brothers had a well-equipped bomb factory, which increased their potential for violence.
The bomb-making components that we found consisted of some metal cylinders, several types of chemicals, mixing bowls, hot plate, coffee filters, instructions for making homemade blasting caps, quite an assortment of bomb-making components.
Receipts on board revealed the family's path since leaving Ohio. They traveled through West Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, Texas, and Montana before ditching the mobile home in Wyoming. The vehicle offered few clues to the Kehoe's current location.
All we knew was that Chevy was last known to be in Indianapolis, where the stolen van was recovered. We presumed that Shane and the families had made it as far as Casper, where the camper had broken down. From that point on, we basically had a cold trail.
To entice the public's help, the FBI and ATF announced that they had joined to offer a reward for the pair's arrest and conviction.
The fact that it was a serious matter involving law enforcement, the fact that they had some affiliation to supremacy groups, and the fact that they were dangerous individuals, we were able to obtain a $60,000 reward for their apprehension.
More than 100 tips came in. The local leads were handled by the Ohio State Police, while the FBI and ATF pursued those from out of state. On June 16th, investigators got the news they were hoping for. A sheriff in Stevens County, Washington, received a call from a friend of Shane Kehoe. Shane wanted to turn himself in. The 21-year-old surrendered to the authorities and informed them where he and his brother had been for the last few months. After the Wilmington shootout, Shane had stolen a car and returned to the campground. There he gathered his and his brother's families and drove to Wyoming, where he met Chevy. Soon after the Kehoes were reunited, the RV broke down. Chevy told investigators that he and his brother had finally found refuge with their families on a remote ranch in rural southern Utah. A farmer and his wife had taken them in and offered them room and board in exchange for doing work on the ranch. Soon the situation began to deteriorate. Chevy couldn't control his explosive temper. Both Shane and his wife, Tana, grew concerned. Chevy talked of building his own white supremacist order. He thought of killing his wife, Karina, because of Native American ancestry in her family. He even talked of murdering his own parents, Kirby and Gloria, in order to raise his 6 younger brothers with his beliefs. On June 12th, almost 4 months after the shootouts in Ohio, Chevy finally turned his growing paranoia on his own brother.
Shane explained to us that they had recently gotten into a fight and that he feared for his life as well as the lives of his family.
Shane also told investigators that Chevy had several items in his possession that belonged to the Muellers. Chevy had also admitted to suffocating the Mueller family. Not knowing what Chevy would do next, Shane and his family fled Utah in the middle of the night, driving almost 1,000 miles back to Washington State. Authorities inspected the truck Shane drove, looking for additional evidence. Lab examiners discovered that the vehicle, which belonged to Chevy Kehoe, had been repainted from its original blue color. FBI forensic chemist Ron Mentold explains.
We often see repainted vehicles in the laboratory here, and we can determine how it was originally painted. The layers of paint can many times be thought of as a stack of cards that is loosely adhered to each other. Okay, and any one card can be withdrawn from the layer and sampled individually. So the ace of diamonds, which is a primer layer, would be different in chemistry and color from the king of spades, which would be on top.
The test results were conclusive. The composition of the blue paint found on the Kehoe's vehicle matched the specs found on the Muellers' bodies. The evidence against Chevy Kehoe was compelling, but capturing him would be no easy task. Investigators would have to travel to Chevy's remote hideout in Utah, where an arrest team could be seen approaching from miles away. Wanted for triple homicide in Arkansas and attempted murder in Ohio, the white supremacist Chevy Kehoe was heavily armed and hiding with his family on an isolated ranch. Apprehending the criminal in the wide open spaces of southern Utah would be dangerous for agents and Chevy's family. The FBI and ATF needed an arrest plan that minimized the risk. Agent Will Long was in charge of coordinating the plan. He is in shadow in order to protect the sensitive nature of his current case.
Chevy's children and his wife were there, And we certainly didn't want to get involved in a situation where they were in the middle of a shooting situation or possible hostage situation.
Long enlisted the help of Rodney Levitt, the farmer on whose land the brothers had been living. Levitt agreed to help the FBI due to his concern for Chevy's children.
He told us that on a regular basis, Chevy Kehoe would, at his request, travel into Cedar City to run errands for him related to the farming operation. And in this case, they had previously talked about Chevy coming into town on this day to pick up some feed from the local feed store. And we decided that we could use that as an opportunity to take him at the feed store in an environment that we could control.
That left agents only 2 hours to get into position before Chevy arrived in town with Levitt.
2 hours is a short amount of time. We placed surveillance units along the road that would be in a position to call out the location of Chevy Kehoe and Mr. Levitt as they made their way into town.
The plan was working perfectly until Chevy Kehoe made an unscheduled stop. The FBI didn't know if Kehoe was onto them and was making a run for it. The agent on location radioed in for assistance. He waited for instructions to apprehend Kehoe or get Levitt to safety. For a few breathless moments, no one knew what would happen next. Chevy returned to the truck with a soda. To the undercover agent, it seemed that Chevy had no suspicions and returned to the road. Back in town, more than 25 agents waited for the arrival of Chevy and Levitt. Snipers were positioned on the rooftops, and the feed store was surrounded. Agents were also located in the nearby neighborhood. Their objective was to prevent Chevy from escaping and taking hostages. While Agent Long loaded hay in front of the feed store, his plan nearly went awry.
As we were listening to the radio, we heard one of the surveillance units call out that Chevy had crossed a landmark that was approximately 1 minute away from the feed store.
At that very moment, the farmer unwittingly pulled into the parking spot the FBI was holding for Chevy. Agent Long had a split second to act.
Sir, I ran across the parking lot with my badge and credentials in my hand. I told this man that a dangerous fugitive was about to pull into the parking lot and that we were going to arrest him right here, and that he needed to immediately get in his vehicle and get out of the parking lot.
The farmer complied, and Long returned to his position. Seconds later, Chevy Kehoe pulled into the parking lot.
FBI, get on the ground! Get down on the ground! Get down on the ground!
Long and his team pounced on the suspected murderer, leaving him no time to reach for a concealed weapon. After 5 months of a nationwide manhunt, the FBI had finally captured Chevy Kehoe. Back at the ranch, there was still the matter of taking Chevy's wife, Karina, and their 3 kids into custody. Once again, Levitt offered his help.
Apparently, Mr. Levitt had an injured back, and Karina would routinely come out and open the gate for Mr. Levitt to let him into the property as a courtesy to him because of his injury.
To open the gate, Karina had to leave the house, giving agents the opportunity to arrest her. Long hid in the back of the truck with 2 other agents.
Just as we anticipated, Karina came out and opened the gate, and as she was looking at the gate and concentrating on manipulating the latch, we jumped out of the back of the truck and immediately searched her and found a loaded 9mm pistol in her back pocket.
Get out on the ground, ma'am. Get out on the ground. Get out on the ground. Spread your legs. Spread your arms.
Long obtained a search warrant for the Kehoe's trailer on the Levitt property.
Okay.
Before inspecting it, the FBI safely escorted the children outside and entrusted them to the farmer. Back inside, Long discovered a well-stocked armory. Chevy Kehoe, anticipating a siege, had stationed loaded guns at every window. With both brothers finally in custody, the pair was transported back east to face 16 state and local charges. Chevy would first be tried in Arkansas on federal charges. With the Kehoes locked up, U.S. Attorney Paula Casey had several months to prepare a solid case.
The federal agents and Aaron Duvall, Jay Winters, came here and they laid out the evidence they had of all the various crimes that had been committed. And after we examined everything that was there was sort of this growing realization as we reviewed these things that it was a racketeering case.
Placing Chevy's illegal activities under a racketeering umbrella, Casey needed to demonstrate that crimes were committed in order to expand his white supremacist movement.
The racketeering statute lets us give a jury the complete picture of what happened. It lets us put that together so that all of the evidence can be placed before the jury for their decision.
Chevy Kehoe was ultimately charged with 57 federal crimes, including the brutal murder of Bill and Nancy and their 8-year-old daughter, Sarah.
Chevy Kehoe was tried, and following a 3-month jury trial, he was found guilty of racketeering, and as a result of his conviction, he received a sentence of life without the possibility of parole, because in the federal system there is no parole.
As for brother Shane, despite his claims of self-defense, he was found guilty of the state charges brought against him. Among them, attempted murder for the shootout in Wilmington. He is currently serving 24.5 years.
The reason I think every agency was so cooperative in working on this was just that it was a horrible crime. It was a crime that was obviously hard for anybody to figure out why it happened, exactly how it would happen. It was just one of those things that everybody wanted to help out, and they knew that we couldn't do it all ourselves, and if it had been their case, they wouldn't have been able to do it by themselves either. So it was just a matter of everybody getting together, because the bottom line was there were some bad people out there, and everybody just needed to get involved for a common cause, and that was to put the bad guy behind bars.